Hi, I am Dr. Mary Pritchard, Associate Chair and Professor in the Department of Psychological Science at Boise State University, and today we are talking about graduate school. It's all about fit, and no one can answer that question better than you. So I'm going to give you a few things to think about before you even start your search for a graduate school. The first question is, what do you actually want to do? Think big. Think about your dream job. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. Start talking to people. Interview people until you find someone who does something that you're really interested in. And then ask them, how did you get here? They're going to have a really good idea of what path you should take to get a similar position to what they are in. Second question you need to ask yourself is, why do I want to do this? Not only do you need to know the answer to that question when it comes to your graduate school application materials and interview process, but you just need to know for yourself, why do you want to do this? You need to be passionate about what you're going to do because this is a big commitment to actually go to graduate school, to pay the money. That's a big commitment. So make sure that you know what you want to do and why you want to do it. The final question is how. How are you going to get there? And that goes back to those informational interviews. Once you've found people or a person that does what you want to do, figure out what their path was. And sometimes if you have a few people you found that do a similar job that you'd like, you may actually find that there's several different pathways to get to that one place that you want to be. And that's okay. Then you just do the one that makes the most sense for you. There are a number of different kinds of graduate programs out there. The most common type that our students go into are master's programs. There's a lot of different kinds of master's programs out there. You might get a master's in sports psychology or clinical or counseling psychology, experimental psychology, forensic psychology. There are so many different pathways to choose from. Master's programs are usually 2 to 3 years. They are the fastest of all the graduate degrees of the ones we're going to talk about today. They tend to not be as likely to be funded by the program. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. But they are kind of the quickest way to get where you want to go. And so again, going back to those informational interviews, maybe a master's degree is all that you need. A PsyD is a doctor of psychology, and those are geared to be clinically focused positions. So very much counseling type focus, clinical type focus. You're going to be a therapist, you're going to be doing assessments. That's really all that you're getting trained to do. They're not research oriented at all. So if you're going into the clinical or counseling route, a PsyD might be good for you. They tend to be 3 to 4 years long in terms of length of the program. Finally is the PhD, doctorate or the Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology. So your PhD programs tend to take 5 to 7 years. So they're the longest of that. They tend to be more research focused, but again, there's a variety of things like the master's that you can get your PhD in. So all the things you can get your master's degree in, you can also get a PhD in. And again, it just matters on what your goals are and what you need to get there. So go back again and do those informational interviews to find out what degree you need to get. There are a number of fabulous programs out there, and there's a number of ways to search for a program. The first place that I actually recommend that you go is to the American Psychological Association, apa.org. They have a large number of resources for undergraduate students looking for graduate programs. You can search by division, you can search by kind of program, you can search by area of the country. So that is kind of a one-stop shop for you. There is a small fee for that. So if you buy into the Guide to Graduate Schools, you do have to pay by, I think, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a year. But it's worth it because they do all the research for you. So it's nice to have that homework on the schools done. If that's just something that feels like you can't afford to do that, there's always websites like graduateschools.com. And of course, you want to go to the school's website itself because that's the best source of information. And again, it's all about fit. So for you, the important factors may be location. If you are landlocked, so to speak, to the Treasure Valley, then you're going to want to go and look at all of the schools here and find out what programs they offer. because you need to stay in the area. If you have the ability to move, one of those larger databases like the APA offers or gradschools.com might be a better source for you because you can move anywhere. So there are a variety of things that schools are looking for, but there are some commonalities. So every school is different in terms of the kinds of things that they're going to ask for you. And so you'll have to apply to that school directly and go on their portal to figure out what you need to upload. But it's pretty common that you're going to be asked to upload your curriculum vitae. This is your academic life. And so it's like a resume of your academic life. And so you're going to list things like your teaching assistantships, your research assistantships, your internships, your relevant work experience, your GPA, your honors, your awards, conferences you presented at. You're going to have to prepare what's called a statement of academic purpose. And this again is kind of like your story of your academic life. And in this, you are telling the school how you are a fit for them and for their program. So each statement of purpose will be tailored individually to the school that you are applying to. And again, some of the schools will give you specific prompts or questions that they want you to answer, and some won't. And so it's really important to go look at each school's website and figure out what they require. GRE, the Graduate Record Examination. Some schools require this, some schools do not. If you're unfamiliar with the term, the GRE is kind of like the ACT or SAT that you may have taken to get into college, only to get into graduate school. And so you need to, again, do your homework and see if the school that you're applying to requires the GRE or not. If it does, there is a fee for taking the test. There is a fee for sending your scores to schools. And then you want to make sure, if you're not a great standardized test taker, that you study for it. So I would make sure that you are doing your homework on schools well in advance of when you want to apply, like 6 months in advance, so that if you have to take the GRE, you can give yourself 3 months or so to prepare and study for that and then do as well as you possibly can. And then also to give yourself time to retake that test if you need to. And then lastly, anything that the school asks you for. So some of them may ask you for a diversity statement. Some of you may ask you for multiple statements of purpose or statements about why you should be a teaching assistant or a research assistant. So again, it goes back to that school itself. So again, the things that you're going to put on your CV are the things that are part of your academic record that distinguish you. So schools are looking at hundreds of applications and they want to know what makes you stand out. So those key experience like research assistantship, what you did for your professor and whether you went to a conference or maybe you submitted a publication, the kind of skills that you learned during that research assistantship. Teaching assistantship, same thing. Internships, and again, your academics, your honors, your awards, things that make you stand out, your volunteer work, jobs that you had that were relevant to the school that you're applying. So again, it's your academic story, and so you want to highlight the academic skills that you've developed that make you a fit for that program. You know, this always depends on the kind of schooling. So your master's program is going to be different than an OT or a PsyD or a PhD. But in general, your classes are probably going to be much smaller than they were at the undergraduate level, tend to be more seminar style. There's going to be a lot more reading and writing. And you tend to take fewer classes at once because they are so much more intense. So you might only take 2 or 3 classes per semester or quarter, as opposed to 4 or 5 plus when you were an undergraduate. And then there will also be potentially classes about practicum. If you are going into clinical or counseling or internship experiences, depending on where you're going, there may be thesis, there may be dissertation related classes. So again, relevant to the school that you're going to and the degree that you're seeking. Funding is a really important issue, and it's something that I recommend that you start investigating as you are investigating your schools, because funding mechanisms vary widely school to school. But there are typically 5 things. And so if you are lucky, and if you're if you're applying to a PhD program, most of the time they have funded slots. So graduate assistantships via research assistantship or teaching assistantship, which is why it's so important for you to get those kind of experiences as an undergraduate, because they're going to be much more likely to give you a research assistantship with funding if you've had 2 years of RA experience, or they're going to give you a teaching assistantship if you TA'd for 3 different classes. So you're much more likely to get those graduate assistantships if you have those extracurricular activities that the schools are looking for that kind of prove that you know how to do this work. So that's the first mechanism. That's the one we hope for. So that's typically a stipend. It's not going to be a huge stipend, but hopefully enough to live on without getting a lot of loans, and then usually a tuition waiver. So graduate assistantships through the program itself. Now maybe your program doesn't offer funded slots. Master's programs, PsyDs, tend to have maybe 2 or 3 funded slots for everybody in that program. So they're very competitive. So what are your other options? So you want to look at whether the school offers school-wide graduate assistantships. So for example, I have a student right now who's getting her master's in counseling, but they don't offer assistantships to first-year students. So she got a graduate assistantship at Boise State through the Dean of Students. And so they are providing her tuition waiver and giving her a small stipend while she's enrolled in the Master's of Counseling at Boise State. So look for other opportunities for graduate assistantships at the university you are attending. Third, you can work for the school. So I've had a lot of students do this. So you typically get steeply discounted tuition if you are an employee. $5 a credit hour is a lot cheaper than $500. And graduate school tends to be more expensive than undergraduate credit for credit. And so again, even if you're working in financial aid or student life or as a janitor, who cares? You're getting that benefit, and that's going to help you get that degree without having a huge amount of debt on the other side. The fourth way some students do this is through employer benefits. So some employers, especially the larger ones, offer some sort of tuition forgiveness or tuition payback, or they'll just kind of pay the school itself for you to get a graduate degree. So you always want to check with your employer or look for employers that offer that benefit of paying for all or part of your graduate education. And then lastly, there's always student loans. They don't have Pell Grants at the graduate level, but you can always do a FAFSA and apply for student loans. Again, this is entirely up to you. If you feel like you've done everything that you need to be a top candidate to get into the schools of your choices and the programs of your choices, there's no need for you to take a gap year. If you're ready to go, go. However, if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a senior, I never RA'd, I never TA'd, I never did an internship, I just have a 3.0 and I don't feel like I'm ready, you might be a good candidate for taking a gap year. So what I would do in that gap year is you want to make the most of it. So don't just take a gap year to take a gap year. Take a gap year to take advantage of some of the opportunities that you missed while you were an undergraduate. So you might want to come back as a second degree seeking student and do a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. Or maybe you did those, but you didn't get any field experience and you're applying to a clinical or counseling program or social work and they're looking for field experience. So use that gap year to get a job where you're working with client populations, and so you get that field experience that they are asking you to have. So do it if it makes sense to you, but definitely take advantage of those gap years. What you don't want to do is just take a few gap years and do nothing related to the field. So make sure that you're doing something and maximizing those gap years to make you a better candidate when you do apply. If you have additional questions, we are here to help. Feel free to email psychadvising@boisestate.edu. Check out the graduate section of our website. And then you're always welcome to reach out to any of our faculty. We all went to graduate school. We know what it's like, and we are here to help and answer your questions.